Hey Cats, it's Paul from the Magic Word. Today I'm joined with Brandon from CreateCommander.
Hey everybody, Brandon here, CreateCommander. You can check me out at CreateCommander on Instagram, Twitter, and of course YouTube.
And so we are looking at Commander Legends, which has so many partner cards. So we partnered together to create this deck. This is Anara and Falthis Animal House. We crammed as many animals as we could into this deck, and we are just excited to show it off for you. So let's get into it.
Hey folks, as he mentioned that we are going to be doing the partner pairing of Anara and Falthis today in kind of a non-human-y Animal House build. This is going to be a budget build. We're going to come in at under a 100 USD, and that is the point behind this one. So is it as high power as it could be? No. Is it going to be a lot of fun? Oh yeah. So let me introduce to you my commander. I have Anara Wolvid Familiar, 3 and a green, legendary wolf beast on a 4/4 body. The keyword on this one is gives your commanders indestructible.
And I'm bringing Falthis, the Shadow Cat Familiar, at 2 and a black for a 2/2 Nightmare Cat, which says, commanders you control have menace and death touch. So basically these two familiars work together, and we give Anara indestructible, menace, and death touch to try and swing in for a lot of damage.
We've arrived here at the card draw section. If you follow my channel, you might know that I like to go through some of the things such as the core 30, and card draw is definitely one of those. You definitely like to be drawing cards in Commander because you don't like sitting there with an empty hand. First up, we have Fierce Empath. It's 2 and a green. It's the elf. It lets you tutor for something big that's 6 or greater and put it into your hand. The next card is Guardian Project, probably one of the best green card draw staples of the format. It's an enchantment. A non-token creature comes onto the battlefield with a different name. Draw a card. Hunter's Insight for 2 and a green. You choose a target creature you control. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player that turn, draw that many cards. Mask of Memory is an equipment that you can equip a creature, and if it does combat damage, you get to draw 2 cards, and if you do, discard 1 of them. So you're kind of looting through, getting rid of some stuff that you may not want. Myth Unbound is a spicy include for this deck. It is 2 and a green for an enchantment. It reduces your commander's tax if it's been killed before by 1, and whenever your commander is put into the command zone from anywhere, you draw a card. So even if a commander does happen to die, that's okay. You're still drawing a card off of it and getting some value out of it. Okame Adversary is the elf warrior that does cost 2 less if an opponent controls a green permanent. It has death touch, so not many people really want to block it. And when it does combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. Next up is the classic, the OG, Phyrexian Arena. If you play black and you need card draw, you probably know what Phyrexian Arena is.
Yes.
Return of the Wild Speaker, instant speed card draw. This deck is all about non-humans, so this definitely has a 2-parter to it. Obviously, it gives your non-humans, +3/+3, but the first bullet point on it, draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. Well, we hope that our wolf beast is going to be quite big. Next, Season of Growth in this deck is going to do a boatload of work. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you get to scry 1, and whenever you cast something that targets a creature you control, you get to draw a card. So you're scrying and drawing a lot off of Season of Growth. Snake Umbra is 2 and a green. It's an enchantment. Pumps your stuff by 1/1, and again, whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, draw a card. Has that totem armor. Love that kind of stuff for protection. And the final card in the card draw section is going to be our big dog, the Woodland Bellower, 4 green for a 6/5 beast. But when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a non-legendary green creature with CMC 3 or less and put it right on the battlefield. So, yeah, it costs a lot, but you get a big thing, and then you get another thing that could be extremely important. So what do you have lined up for us next, sir?
So as we said, we're trying to swing in with Anara, trying to get that commander damage, and what we want to do is make sure that Anara stays safe. We want to protect her at all costs, so we're going to look into all our different protection spells, starting off with Alpha Authority. This is an aura for 1 green and 1. It gives Anara hexproof, and also can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, so has to be blocked by 1 creature. Falthis says has menace. So basically that means it can't be blocked at all, right, Brandon?
That's pretty much the point. A little bit of a hidden trickery within this deck, and I think you're going to see a few more cards that'll kind of follow along that theme coming up shortly.
It's so cool that these cards all work together to make unblockable. Like, it doesn't say unblockable, but that's what it does. We're going to move on to Autumn's Veil. So this is an instant, cost 1 green. Spells you control can't be countered by blue or black spells this turn, and creatures you control can't be the targets of blue or black spells. So pretty much just, if someone's trying to kill your Anara off, say, no, I got the Autumn's Veil, that's not going to happen. We also have Blossoming Defense, that's pretty similar. It costs 1 green, instant. Target creature you control gets 2/2 and hexproof. So hexproof protects Anara, and if Anara is currently swinging in, that 2/2 is going to be just a little extra pump. Continuing on with our Umbras, we have Boar Umbra at 2 and a green. Enchanted creature gets 3/3 and has totem armor. I'm going to go through, I'll do all the Umbras right now together. We have the Snake Umbra that we already saw, which I think that's one of the best ones just because the totem armor plus the can draw card works really well together. And then we also have Spider Umbra, which gives 1/1 and reach and totem armor, which might not be that great, but for only 1 green, pretty much saves Anara's life one time. Worth it. Then we also have Familiar Ground, which is another card similar to Alpha Authority. It's a enchantment, 2 and a green. Each creature you control can't be blocked by more than 1. So this goes for all your creatures. Mainly Anara is going to be benefiting off of it, but you never know how the game's going to turn out. This could help all your creatures swing in. We have Golgari Charm, which costs black and a green, instant. And the mode that you would use for this one, for that protection, is to regenerate each creature you control. It has a couple other modes, and we're going to look at those as we go through. But definitely, regenerating each creature you control is very good, as we've moved away from the Wraths that used to be printed, always had can't be regenerated. Now many of the Wraths that get printed, the board wipes that get printed, don't have this rider that say can't regenerate, so we're going to use that regenerate each creature. We have Silent Arbiter, which is an artifact creature construct that costs 4 for a 1/5. No more than 1 creature can attack each combat, and no more than 1 creature can block. So this is Anara swinging in. You can only swing with Anara. That's okay, because Anara can't be blocked with Falthis in play, or any of the other ones that give the menace. So, really good way to get that commander damage through, for sure. We also have Supernatural Stamina, which costs 1 black. Until end of turn, target creature gets 2/0, and it gains, if this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped. So pretty much, it dies and comes back. We have Swiftfoot Boots, Classic Boots, Hexproof and Haste. Undying Evil, similar to Supernatural Stamina, for 1 black. Target creature gets Undying until end of turn. So Anara would die and come back with an extra 1/1 counter. Very nice. Veil of Summer, similar to Autumn's Veil. This costs 1 green. You draw a card if an opponent casts a blue or black spell this turn, and spells you control can't be countered this turn. And you and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and black until end of turn. So that one does a lot. Finally, Vines of Vastwood costs green, and has kicker for another green. So target creature can be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control, so it gets hexproof. And then if it's kicked, the creature gets 4/4. So very cost effective way to protect Anara, get extra damage through. And just a reminder, all of these spells that we're using to protect Anara, to pretty much bring her back if she's about to die, all work with Season of Growth. You're going to draw a card every time you do one of these, so that's just another way that these cards all work together. But because we are Voltron, we don't just want to protect Anara, we want to pump her up even more. So why don't you tell us about that, Brandon?
Absolutely. So the first thing that we're going to look at in the pump section of this particular deck is Blackblade Reforged. It's a pretty common equipment that we like to run, especially if you're going to be targeting a legendary creature, because it takes the equip cost way down, all the way down to 3. So, but that one, you get 1/1 for each land you control. That can make Anara really big just by attaching that equipment. You've already kind of touched on the Boar Umbra, so I won't actually do the repetition there. But Colossification is a new one for my Coria, and I will talk about that one for a second. Yes, it taps Anara down, but if she gets to untap, and with all the protection that she has, I hope she does, that immediately puts her in lethal range for somebody, because Colossification gives something to +20/+20. That's just stupid. Anyway, Creekwood Liege, 1 Golgari. So you have some flexibility there. Hybrid mana. Other black creatures you get +1/+1. Other green creatures you have get +1/+1. And then at your upkeep, you may put a 1/1 black and green worm creature token onto the battlefield. So it's just some chump blockers, a little bit of protection for you. Again, we're just looking for the pump spells mainly, or the pump portion of that mainly, but having extra blockers is always nice. Increasing Savagery is a card not many people know about. I think it does a lot of work in this deck, though, because for 2 green, you get 5 +1/+1 counters on a target creature, also known as Anara. If it was cast from your graveyard, then you put 10 +1/+1 counters on that creature instead, and it has flashback for 5 green. So for 7, you're putting 10 +1/+1 counters onto Anara. I think that that's actually excellent value. I know it's a lot, and I know it's a big spell, but I think that that's some excellent value. Loyal Guardian has that lieutenant mechanic. At the beginning of your combat on your turn, if you control your commander, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. It's a 4/4 by itself, so that's with trample, so that's pretty good, and it's by itself. Primal Bellow is instant speed pump. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each forest you control. There's probably a few forests in the deck. We'll get to those in a little bit. Rancor is a classic. It's 1 +2/+0 with trample. Whenever Rancor's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you can return it back to your hand, kind of thing. Again, it's just self-recursion for a 1-drop is kind of silly. We talked earlier about Return of the Wild Speaker, pumping your non-humans +3/+3. Also Snake Umbra, Spider Umbra. The final one that we will talk about, though, is Thunderfoot Baloth, another lieutenant card. As long as you control your commander, Thunderfoot Baloth gets +2/+2, and other creatures you control get +2/+2 and trample. So this one actually helps Anara get through whether they have chump blockers for days or not. So that's kind of how we're going to pump up the Voltron, but how are we going to pay for that?
So we're in green. We're definitely going to ramp. We're going to start off with Arcane Signet. Not classic yet, but you're definitely going to be seeing this card, especially since it just got reprinted in Commander Legends. And we're going
It will be a classic. Let's be honest.
For
it's
sure.
going to be a classic. It's been reprinted like 4 times in a year.
Yeah. And I hope the price goes down just a little bit more, but it's still good at where it's at now. Then we're going to go to Dawn Treader Elk for 1 green, 1 and a green. You get a 2/2 Elk, and you can pay 1 green and sacrifice it to put a basic land into play tapped. Going to Farseek, a green and 1. Sorcery, search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain. Probably going to get a swamp, and comes into play tapped. We got Fertilid. This elemental costs 2 and a green. It comes into play with 2 1/1 counters. You could pay 1 green and 1 to remove a counter, and then target player searches their library for a basic land, most likely targeting yourself in this deck. Then we're going to move right into Rampant Growth. 1 green and 1, get a land. Pretty much, that's the first ramp spell anyone learns. Sakura Tribe Elder, 1 green and 1. Sack the Sakura Tribe Elder and get a basic land. We got Soul Ring, the classic of Commander. We got 3 visits. Been around a long time. No one had it because it was hundreds of dollars, but it being reprinted in Commander Legends, maybe you'll see it more often. For 1 green and 1, you can search your library for a forest card and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. So, we've seen this in Nature's Lore, probably more likely if you've seen that card, the other version of it. And then finally we have Wood Elves. So for 1 green and 2, you get a 1/1 elf, and when it comes into play, search your library for a forest card, put it into play, and shuffle. So all these cards are going to work together to make sure you're able to get Anara out, have enough mana to pump her up, and protect her all in the same turn, hopefully. But if things don't go to plan, something happens to Anara, or there's just another more aggressive player on the table, you want to take your turn, take your time to kind of build up, you can play out some of these cards, I call them Rattlesnake cards. So these are cards that you are going to leave out in play, and just by having them, people are going to be less incentivized to attack you. They're going to give you kind of that breathing room to give you extra turns to draw, to play your ramp spells, to develop. So let's look at those cards.
So the first one that we're going to talk about in the Rattlesnake section is one we've actually touched on already. It's Ocame Adversary. It is the elf, and it's just a 2/3 that draws you cards, but, oh, by the way, it also has Death Touch. So if you leave it up and leave it open, they're not likely to attack you with some 5/5 or 6/6, because this little 2-powered thing can take it out, no problem whatsoever. Next, you have Gonti, Lord of Luxury, 2 black for a 2/3, but there's a boatload of text on this dude, so let's get started. Has Death Touch right off the bat. Just boom, right there. When it ETBs, you look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library, exile one of them face down, put the rest on the bottom of that person's library in a random order, look at that card, and cast that card as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. So basically, you look at their top 4, you rip the best one out of there, hang on to it for a little bit, put the other 3 on the bottom of their library so that they don't have it. This is especially fun after somebody has done some top deck manipulation or something like that. That's a little dirty trick, so don't do that to people, or do. Depends on how degenerate you want to be. Next up, we'd already talked about Silent Arbiter, but only being able to attack with 1 creature is one thing. Only being able to block with 1 creature is one thing. Putting those both together on the same card is a little bit silly. But at that point, if you're only attacking and blocking with 1 creature, and they're only attacking and blocking with 1 creature, they're going to have to be very, very, very picky about what they put in there, especially if you have another creature out with Death Touch on it, because it's almost certainly going to die.
Right.
And finally, Vampire Nighthawk is the OG. It's been around for a little while now for 1 black. Flying, Death Touch, Lifelink. 3 keywords, extremely important, but a flyer that is 2/3, being able to have something in the air that can block somebody else that's playing flying stuff is super important. So, now, in case something does happen to die, though, we got to be able to get it back.
That's right.
So, how are we going to do that?
We have Phyrexian Reclamation. So this is a really good enchantment. It costs 1 black, and then for 1 and a black and 2 life, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. This, if you don't have the Myth Unbound, this is pretty much the black version of Myth Unbound, because you're just going to keep bringing Anara or Falthis back to your hand with this, and hopefully for only 2 life, that's not a big impact, because you're going to be doing a lot more damage to your opponents. And then we're going to look at Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. So this costs 4 and a black. It's a legendary sorcery, meaning you do need a legendary creature or a planeswalker to cast it. But we have 2 legendary creatures in the command zone, so hopefully you do have a legendary creature out. You put up to 1 target creature or planeswalker from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and then destroy up to 1 creature or planeswalker, and then exile Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. So this does a lot for 5. You get rid of something, you get the best creature or planeswalker back. Doesn't have to be your own. And it's just has a lot going on to advance the board state how you want it to. So it kind of is removal, and so we do have removal built into the deck. And let's take a look at the other removal options we have.
First up in the removal section, Beast Within is the classic. It's been around forever. You destroy target permanent. This gets rid of, the troublesome lands. I talk about it all the time on my channel too. If you're playing green, or you have green as a splash color, Beast Within goes in simply because you can take care of a troublesome land that, if somebody's playing a Valakut, or somebody's playing a, if they're going for a gate strategy to where they're trying to win out with gates, or Field of the Dead and they're trying to swamp the thing up with zombies, or whatever it might be, I play Beast Within all the time simply to try and get rid of a problem land. Deadly Tempest is a board wipe. Each player loses life equal to the number of creatures he or she controlled that were destroyed this way. This is especially devastating if you're playing a Krenko deck, or if your opponent's playing a Krenko deck or a Reese the Redeemed deck, where you're just making token after token. You're like, sure, for 6, I'll board wipe, and guess what? You just took 25 damage. Have a good day. Demon of Wailing Agonies, 3 black. This one also has the Lieutenant. As long as you control your commander, it gets +2/+2, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player has to sacrifice a creature. So sacrificing is one way to get around the indestructible stuff. I talk about it all the time as well on my channel. Theros gods, Ulamog, the Eldrazi's, those indestructible things, they have a lot of ways that they can keep themselves on the board. Well, if players are having to sacrifice stuff, there's really no way around that unless they sacrifice it themselves for whatever value that they may need to get out of it. Fleshbag Marauder is another sacrifice kind of thing. ETBs, players have to sacrifice a creature. A lot of times you can play out Fleshbag, sacrifice itself, so that's your creature for, your sacrifice, and then everybody else has to sacrifice something that's probably more important than a 3/1.
Right.
Golgari Charm we kind of already talked about. You can destroy a target enchantment. A lot of enchantments in the format that are extremely difficult to deal with. Solemnity, or Rhystic Studies, or I could just go on and on with the amount of enchantments that are problematic. So being able to get rid of them, and this also hits enchantment creatures, so don't forget that. Life's Finale. Destroy all creatures. Search target opponent's library for up to 3 creatures and put them into his or her graveyard, and that player shuffles his or her library. So basically, if you know they're not playing a whole lot of removal, or recursion rather, and you're like, yeah, I know that this guy runs a lot of creature-based combo stuff, just boom, 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 here's a couple pieces of your combos, and sayonara, it goes into the graveyard. Merciless Executioner is Fleshbag Marauder 2.0, I guess, is how you'd put that.
Yep.
Putrefy, another classic. I don't even know how long that card's been around, but 1 black-green, destroy target artifact or creature. So you got to have some artifact removal if you're going to be playing in EDH of some form or another. Big thing on that one is it can't be regenerated.
Right.
So we talked about that earlier, about how a lot of the cards don't have the regenerate thing or what have you. Well, this definitely gets around that because it's been around for a while. Return to Nature is 1 and a green, and I like this one. Nature's Claim is great in certain decks. I like Return to Nature in this particular deck simply because we don't have a lot of artifact and enchantment removal, but we also don't have a lot of ways to target other players' graveyards. So being able to take care of a problematic card, like if somebody ditches an Anger into their graveyard and giving all their stuff haste, well, we can just get rid of it, and everything's got to come in with Summoning Sickness like it normally would.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that kind of helps out. For all you newer players out there, that's kind of some of the plays that you can make to help yourself. Yeah, it might be helping the rest of the table too, but getting rid of a card like that is extremely important from time to time. Slim Reaper, 3 and a black, ETBs. Each player sacrifices a creature. It's basically it's 4/2 instead of a 3/1 Fleshbag Marauder, essentially. Vana's Hunger is actually a really spicy one, and I had honestly forgot about this card, and you put this one in the deck, and I really like it. For 2 and a black, it has the Ascend, the City's Blessing stuff from Ixalan. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. This is instant speed, and if you have the City's Blessing instead, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures he or she controls, rounded up. Love it. Finally, the last one in the removal section is the Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. You just touched on it about how you have to get rid of, destroy up to 1 target creature or Planeswalker. I like having Planeswalker removal actually in the deck because sometimes, especially if you have a friend who plays Atraxa, you might be seeing a few Planeswalkers here or there.
So I have a few cards that are not in such tight grouping as we've seen with the other ones. So I'm just going to jump into it. We have Loyal Subordinate first. We've seen all the other possible lieutenant combinations for green and black, so I wanted to throw this one in too. Cost 1 black and 2 for a zombie. 3/1 with Menace. And lieutenant at the beginning of combat on your turn. If you control your commander, each opponent loses 3 life. I've played with this card before, and it just melts people's life totals because that 3 life is not optional. It's going to happen. And then the Loyal Subordinate swings in, has Menace. If you have the Familiar Ground on, he's just going to swing in for free, no blocks at all. That damage adds up. And then kind of to counteract that, We have Sangromancer in the deck. So this is a 2 black and 2 for a Vampire Shaman with flying. 3/3. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain 3 life. And then whenever an opponent discards a card, you gain 3 life. So we don't have that much discard in the deck, but we're anticipating a lot of creatures dying, whether we're swinging in and they're doing chump blockers, or they have little value pieces that we're just picking apart with our Golgari Charm or our Putrefy, whatever we need to. We're going to gain life off that as well, just to make sure we're healthy enough to let Anara finish the job on time. And just in case Anara is not able to get it done, I don't know what's going to happen to Anara, but something might happen. So we also do have Exsanguinate in the deck, which costs X and 2 black for a sorcery. Each opponent loses X life. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. So that's just a great finisher. We have a lot of ramp. We're just going to be having a lot of lands available to us to finish someone off with an Exsanguinate, or the other one is Torment of Hailfire. So this also costs 2 black and X, sorcery. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. So this is a little more, gives them a choice of what they want to do, but once you get that X high enough, there's not really a way around the opponent surviving. Even if they're still in the game, they will have sacrificed so many permanents or discarded so many cards that they're kind of out of it, right?
This is especially good to play immediately following a board wipe on your next turn or something like that.
Ooh, yeah. I've never played this card, despite being a mono black player. So definitely appreciate that insight there.
Yeah, and the reason for Exsanguinate and Torment being in the deck as like alternative win cons, or just ways to finish out the game, is simply because we don't really have a lot of ways. Like we didn't have it. Again, we're trying to make sure that we stay within budget.
So then the final piece, I guess, is just to look at the lands. Like we said, it is a budget build, so not super interesting in terms of many different non-basics, but let's just jump into it. We have 18 forests, 13 swamps. We also have a command tower, a Llanowar Wastes, which I really like this cycle of lands. There's also a Tainted Wood, which is kind of a dual land as long as you have a swamp already. Twilight Mire is going to give you the colors you need. And then the Woodland Cemetery, which comes into play tapped unless you control a swamp or a forest. And you do, because there's so many basics in this deck.
Well, Paul, thank you for having me on. That was the Anara and Falthis deck. I enjoyed doing this partner build with you and partnering up with you on the channel. It was a whole lot of fun, and I hope that you folks out there enjoy the deck. If you play it, leave him a comment. Make sure that you let him know that you built it. If it had had some good success with it and swung in with a lot of wolfy damages, because that would be pretty awesome. Or obviously if Exsanguinate or Torment kind of did their thing. For me, you can check me out at CreateCommander, as I mentioned, on Instagram, Twitter, and check me out on YouTube at CreateCommander as well. So, but again, Paul, thanks for having me on the channel. I really appreciated the build and had a whole lot of fun. So I hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, it was fun. I'll definitely see you around again. Maybe I'll jump over to your channel. And as for anyone who liked this video, definitely like and subscribe. Comment, please. And I will see you in the future.